The call to adventure is the second point in the hero's journey story structure, and that's the point at which your story really starts. Today, we're going to be talking about the call to adventure and how to write an effective call to adventure when you're writing a story in accordance to the hero's journey story structure. This is the second video on my hero's journey series, so if you are new to my channel and just finding this video for the first time, I made a separate video on the first stage of the hero's journey, the ordinary world, which I published last week and which you can find in the description. But if you've already watched that video and you're ready to learn about the call to adventure, then you've come to the right place. If you are new to my channel, hello, welcome. My name is Claire Fraze, and I'm an award-winning young adult author who makes videos on this channel sharing the actionable writing advice that I got that helped me make my own writing better. I am the author of young adult supernatural thriller They Stay, which is the first in a supernatural thriller series that I like to describe as Stranger Things with ghosts. And I'm also the author of the young adult dystopian Imperfect, which I published while I was in high school. So I make a lot of videos on this channel also sharing about my experience as a teen writer and chatting with other teen authors who are publishing their first books. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, make sure to hit subscribe, and without further ado, let's get into the content. So in our last video in this series, I talked a lot about the origin of the hero's journey, and Joseph Campbell essentially created the hero's journey after noticing similarities in many different stories and coming up with a theory that humans like having certain things in the stories they consume. This led to him creating the hero's journey, or monomyth, as a structure for writers to be able to see all of these different elements that maybe people subconsciously long for in stories and structure their stories around that. In the hero's journey, your hero embarks on an adventure. They spend most of the story in that place where they're adventuring, in a supernatural world, in an other world, and eventually return back to where they started in the ordinary world, somehow changed. The time your hero spent in that different world changes them in some monumental way. And the call to adventure, the second stage in the hero's journey, is the first time they come into contact with that other world. So I'm going to start by giving you a broad definition of what the call to adventure is, and then I'm going to give you some examples illustrating what a good call to adventure looks like, and lastly I'm going to share the 3 things that every call to adventure needs in order to be most effective. So first, what is a call to adventure? Reedsy had a really cool definition of this, which I'm going to share with you and read to you because it is honestly better than anything I could have come up with for the sake of this video. So a call to adventure is the point at which an adventure starts. It is about booting the hero out of their comfort zone, and in this stage, they are generally confronted with a problem or challenge that they can't ignore. This catalyst can take many forms, as Campbell points out in Hero of the Thousand Faces. The hero can, for instance, decide to go forth on their own volition, be sent abroad by a benign or malignant agent, stumble upon the adventure as a result of a mere blunder, be casually strolling when some passing phenomenon catches the wandering eye and lures one away from the frequented paths of man. In the call to adventure, the stakes of the adventure and the hero's goals become clear. The only question: will he rise to the challenge? So as you can see, the call to adventure can take many forms. It's important to note that the call to adventure is not the point at which the hero embarks on this adventure. It is only the point where they brush against the adventure or learn that there is an adventure that they could potentially embark on. But the next stage after this is called the refusal of the call. So your hero still needs to be able to refuse the call before accepting the call and actually embarking on this adventure. So this is just the point where they're first introduced to it. So now that we've got the definition out of the way, what are some examples of some calls to adventure? The one that I personally really like to use as an example of a good call to adventure is the call to adventure in the Hunger Games books. I use the Hunger Games books a lot as an example on this channel just because I love them so much, but the Hunger Games has a very clear call to adventure, and that is the point at which Prim gets chosen for the reaping at the end of chapter 1. If you haven't read the Hunger Games, there may be a couple of spoilers, but I'm really only going to be talking about stuff that happens in the first couple of chapters. But the Hunger Games is the story of 16-year-old Katniss Everdeen, who volunteers to take her younger sister's place in their annual reaping to choose children from every district in their country that will fight to the death on a televised battle royale. At the end of chapter 1, Prim's name gets chosen to be the female tribute representing her district to fight to the death in these televised games, and Katniss volunteers in her place, knowing that Prim is only 12 and is probably not going to survive these games, so she volunteers to take her sister's place instead to save her life and fight to the death in her place. So in my interpretation of the Hunger Games, Prim getting chosen reason to compete in the games is the call to adventure, because in that moment, Katniss has to make a choice as to whether she is going to embark on this adventure or not, and then she decides to volunteer to take her sister's place, and that kickstarts the entire story. That launches her into this quote-unquote supernatural world, as they call it in the hero's journey, this other world that takes her away from the ordinary world, which she will ultimately return back to over the course of the book. Another great example of a call to adventure is the call to adventure in Star Wars: A New Hope. This call to adventure happens when Luke Skywalker hears the message that Princess Leia left in R2-D2, and Obi-Wan Kenobi tells Luke to come with him to Alderaan and tells him all about the Jedi and this greater conflict that is happening that he didn't know about. This is Luke's first brush with adventure, first brush with learning about the Jedi, but he doesn't want to go embark on this quest with Obi-Wan, and then he refuses the call, which we're going to talk about in our next video, and only enters this adventure because of something else that happens later on in the movie. He doesn't hear about this and immediately decide he wants to go on this quest and jumps on the opportunity. He's a little bit hesitant and has to be pushed into it by some other forces. But the call to adventure is still the point at which he learns about this conflict going on. He just isn't quite ready to step up to the plate yet. So that being said, there are 3 things that your call to adventure needs in order to be most effective. And first, your call to adventure needs to promise change. If your hero embarks on this quest, something is going to change. Every hero in a story has something that they want, and a lot of the times the quest that the hero goes on during the hero's journey is to get that thing that they want. Either get the girl, or save their family, or save themselves. But the point at which your character brushes against the larger adventure before they actually choose to cross the threshold and embark on the adventure has to show a glimmer of how they will change if they go on this adventure, a glimmer of what they'll encounter, or a glimmer of what they will get if they are able to be successful. Second, there has to be consequences for not taking action and not going on this adventure. In the Hunger Games, there are pretty clear consequences. If Katniss doesn't volunteer to take Prim's place, Prim is gonna die. She's 12, she's tiny, she would have to fight to the death against 18-year-olds who have been training for this basically their entire lives. She's basically dead and Katniss knows it, and if she doesn't volunteer to take her place, she will have to watch her sister die. This is a pretty intense consequence for not stepping up to the plate and taking action and going on this adventure. If Dorothy doesn't go and try to find her way home, she may be stuck in Oz forever. I love using the example of Disney's Moana to illustrate the hero's journey, and the reason that Moana has to embark on her quest and cross the ocean and restore the heart of Te Fiti is because they will starve on her island if she doesn't go replenish the heart of Te Fiti and save her island. You learn about at the beginning of the movie that their food sources are becoming depleted, they're worried about starving, but their current leadership does not want to leave because they are worried of the open ocean, and Moana has to be the one to take on that challenge and go restore the heart of Te Fiti and go save her people. So she does have a choice as to whether or not she wants to embark, but there will be consequences if she doesn't embark. And third, your call to adventure needs to require a choice. What makes stories exciting to watch and read is waiting to see what choices the heroes are going to make. You want your protagonist to be active, and you want things to happen in your story as a result of what your character does or chooses to do. If they're just continuously forced into terrible situations by external forces, and it's not as a result of something that they choose, they are not an active protagonist, and they're not as interesting to read about. So you want your call to adventure to involve some kind of choice. In my book, They Stay, this choice is whether or not my character is going to go take on the responsibility to save her younger brother herself, or simply rely on law enforcement to do it. Deep down, she doesn't believe that she's capable of doing something like that because she grew up in an abusive household and her father constantly told her that she is not capable of doing things. But in order to save her brother, because law enforcement is not exploring options that she thinks that they should be exploring, she needs to choose to rise to the occasion in order to save him. The call to adventure in that book is when he goes missing, but she doesn't immediately start saving him. She second guesses herself, she gets worried, she refuses to want to actually go out and save him, and then eventually she rises up and she goes and crosses the threshold and goes and embarks on this adventure. But there's still that element of choice where she has to choose to go embark on this adventure. So that is a basic overview of what the call to adventure is, what it looks like, and how to write an effective one. If you're interested in continuing this series, I will be making a video on all 12 stages of the hero's journey, the next one being the refusal of the call, where we will talk about what happens when the hero doesn't immediately choose to go on this adventure. So if you're interested in watching those videos, make sure to hit subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss when I publish another video about the hero's journey. And leave me a comment below. What is the call to adventure in the story that you're writing? I love listening to people talk about their stories, so do me a favor and drop me a comment. I hope you have a good week, everyone, and as always, happy writing.